This is Leaders in the Trenches, and your host today is Gene Hammett.
Hi, my name is Gene Hammett. I am your host. This is episode number 287. We have a very special episode today. Let me ask you the big question. How do you get out of your comfort zone? Do you even know that you're in your comfort zone? Well, if you've ever kind of had a second guess around that next level pricing or putting yourself out there, talking to a meeting planner about a big opportunity stage, and it hasn't kind of made your gut turn, then you're probably playing inside your comfort zone. Just keeping it real here. So if you want to learn how to do this on a regular basis, then I brought on a special guest. And I know I wrote the book called The Trap of Success, which really is about getting out of your comfort zone. But I've also gone out to other fellow writers that have written books around the comfort zone. So my guest today is Andy Molinsky. He has written 2 books, one of them called Reach, a new strategy to help you step outside your comfort zone, rise to the challenge, and build confidence. He's a PhD, which means he has a lot of studying behind him. He's also a professor in a college that I will tell you a little more about in a few minutes when we interview him. But Andy is an expert on this. And if you want to learn how to do this, then listen in to both of us kind of go back and forth about comfort zone. Now, if you have not already downloaded my book, if you haven't already bought the book in some way, I want you to hold off. Don't buy it. Why would I not want you to buy it? Because I've got a very special deal coming right around the corner that will give you mega savings and package some things together. So you will be able to get that, and you can do that. All you have to do is wait a week. I'm not going to tell you what you have to do because you have to come back and listen to the next show. All right. So now here's the interview with Andy Molinsky. Andy, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. It's great to have you here at Leaders in the Trenches.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So as normal, I've already introduced you. I've told our audience what I thought they should know about you, but I'd love for you to tell them in your own voice. So tell us about you and who you serve.
Sure. Well, I serve multiple people or types of people, I'd say. And I think that's reflective of the fact that I kind of live a dual professional life. I'm a professor at Brandeis University at the business school and in the psychology department. So in that sense, I serve students, undergraduate, MBA, and some executive ed students. But at the same time, I'm also a business author. I've written a couple of business books. I write for Inc.com, Psychology Today, Harvard Business Review. I do a lot of consulting and teaching and training in professional context. So in that way, I guess those are the 2 groups of people that I speak to, and hopefully my stuff really positively influences.
So we've had a few professors here on the show. So let me just ask you, why do you teach at the college, and focus around the MBA students?
Well, my original training was, I have a PhD in organizational behavior and psychology. And so originally I went into the field of academics. And what I found was that academics ultimately was a great place almost like for R&D purposes, because it really helps you hone in a very critical way your ideas. But in terms of being able to speak and influence and touch a broader audience, you can do some through your teaching. But that's where I started really getting interested in writing for a general audience in terms of my books and in my articles. And then from there, I got a lot of requests to speak and do consulting and teaching and training and so on, and so it emerged organically from there. But my original career is as an academic, as a researcher first, and as a teacher.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. So it should be an interesting conversation here as we go forward with this. You've got a new book that came out earlier this year called Reach. Tell us about why that book had to be written.
Yeah, so Reach is about stepping outside your comfort zone. Why is it hard for us? How do we avoid doing it? And I think to some extent all of us do, if you're honest with yourself. And then what you can do about it, like how you can be more successful. And that book emerged, I would say, in 2 different ways. The first way was just that it was inside of me. It's something that I have struggled with my whole life. When I give keynotes about this topic, I always start by saying, it's kind of a bit ironic here that I'm the expert on stepping outside your comfort zone, or at least seen to be. But, I've struggled my whole life and continue to in stepping outside my comfort zone. But I think it makes me attuned to the challenges. So that's one sort of reason why I wrote the book. The other reason I wrote the book is that my first book, which was called Global Dexterity, was about stepping outside your cultural comfort zone, like doing business across cultures, communicating across cultures, and especially when you have to step outside your cultural comfort zone. I got such feedback from that book, from email and LinkedIn and various places, that the ideas in that book had a much broader audience beyond just crossing cultures, that the topic of stepping outside your comfort zone period is a very interesting and impactful topic. And so that also influenced me. So I think those are the two reasons.
So what I heard in the first one is it was basically to scratch your own itch.
In a way, I think a lot of artists and authors, thinkers start with things that they find to be a struggle, because I think that's ultimately where your greatest insights and also greatest motivations are going to come from.
Well, I think about this in the way my book, The Trap of Success, which is out. As we're recording this, it's not actually out, but as this publishes, it is out on Amazon. So The Trap of Success has a big component of getting outside your comfort zone in there. So that's one reason why I'm having you on the show and talk about this. Go deeper, Andy. You ready?
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's go.
Let's go into it. I know from my perspective, my own book is kind of a scratch your own itch. I wish I would have had this book years ago to really propel me forward to create something in my business life, my professional life, and even my personal life that, frankly scared the heck out of me. And I just chose to be comfortable. I chose to play safe. So I'm sure you hear these all the time. What inside your book applies to kind of that playing safe and being comfortable? Yeah,
no. And it's a big challenge. And that's really what the first part of my book's about, is what are the reasons why it's so hard for us to step outside our comfort zone. I mean, in casually speaking, we know, because it's stressful, right? Because it's stressful to step outside our comfort zone. It makes us afraid, but why particularly? So what I did is I did a lot of research. I spoke with managers, executives, entrepreneurs, doctors, police officers, actors, students, even priests, rabbis, teachers, even a goat farmer. I spoke with all sorts of people about all sorts of situations, from public speaking to being assertive, to speaking your mind, to speaking up in meetings, to pitching and promoting yourself, all sorts of things, starting a business, getting funding. And so what I found is that it boiled down to 5 different challenges, or 5 different aspects of stepping outside your comfort zone that were so hard. And that's why people avoided it. The first was, I can just quickly go through them. The first was authenticity, the fear that this is not me. Me stepping outside my comfort zone, this does not feel like me. I feel like an imposter, maybe speaking in front of a meeting or putting on my grown-up voice when pitching to venture capitalists or whatever the situation is, but it doesn't feel like me. That's feeling inauthentic. The second challenge was competence. I'm not good at this. And by the way, other people can see I'm not good at this. That also keeps people inside their comfort zones. A third is likability, the fear that people won't like or respect this new version of me. If I act in this way that I'm not used to, people won't like it or respect me. A fourth is resentment. Sometimes people are frustrated that they have to step outside their comfort zone in the first place. And then morality. And I didn't find a lot of examples of this, but there were enough of them where people were afraid that stepping outside their comfort zone in a particular situation was a threat to their ethics and morals. I actually begin my book with a true story of a woman who had to fire her best friend from her startup, which she experienced is a challenge in many ways. And one of those ways was as a morality challenge.
I love the 5. I didn't look at it from that perspective, but I can certainly appreciate that and know that that's certainly a part of it. You talked about authenticity, and in one of my speeches, I talk about there's kind of 3 aspects of anything that you're going to do that's new. The first one's awkward, right? It's awkward to kind of do something new. The first time I ever done a podcast interview was really awkward for me. And then it moved into acceptance. I got comfortable with it, right? It was, okay, I can do this. And then it got into authenticity, which is really just, it's a part of me now.
Yeah, discovering your own voice. And I guess part of the problem is that during those early discomfort stages, you got to be able to stick with it, because if not, I mean, what a lot of people do is they experience discomfort or anticipate experiencing discomfort and just avoid it. They use one of their avoidance mechanisms and don't do it, or maybe rationalize and say, no, podcasting, it's not that important. I don't really need to do this. When the reality is that it would be a real boon to your business, and it's a good thing to do, and maybe something you want to do, but you might rationalize it away if you're too scared.
Do you want free access to the biggest business networking event of the year? Check out the Small Business Expo. It's free to attend and features more than 25 free business workshops, panel discussions, speed networking sessions, business card showcase, and over 100 exhibits. Gain leads and network with business experts, including AT&T Business, Geico, and Allstate. There's something for everyone at the Small Business Expo. The Small Business Expo is the largest and most anticipated business-to-business networking event, trade show, and conference for business owners, entrepreneurs, and decision makers. If you're serious about your business, this expo is a must-attend event. Startups and business owners can take advantage of free admission and educational workshops covering online social media marketing, employee benefit plans, credit and financing, strategies for increasing revenue, and team productivity, mentoring, cloud technologies, retirement plans, and much more. Don't miss the Atlanta Small Business Expo at Cobb Galleria Center on Thursday, November 9th from 9 to 5. Register for free today at thesmallbusinessexpo.com. That's thesmallbusinessexpo.com. Now, if you're in Atlanta, I'd love to see you there because I'll be speaking. You can hear me and see me in person. I'll be signing books. So I'd love to see you there. The Trap of Success is waiting for you. And if you missed this and it's past the time, go to thesmallbusinessexpo.com anyway, because they have one in a city near you and you can find out what's going on in 2018. That's my piece to you. Thanks. I want to get your perspective on this because I came up with two types of courage inside my book. And I just want to kind of bounce them off you. I don't know if you organize them in different ways from that. The first one being pivotal moment courage, which is when your back's up against the wall, you'll do anything you can to get back up and fight your way through that tough time. And a lot of people have faced that, but that's not what we face day in and day out. Day in and day out, I think what I call everyday courage. And that's just that, all those little micro movements that we make and those decisions that we do or not do to move forward and keep going despite being uncomfortable. Did you organize courage in a different way within your work?
Well, I think that I didn't talk about courage as much as I talk about tips and tools and strategies for enabling yourself to take action, which essentially is courage. So I like the way that you arrange that. Courage is essentially, it's not the absence of fear. It's the ability to take action in spite of the fear that you're experiencing. That's what courage is, right? And so, and I like the idea that, and essentially you're talking about courage under different types of intense fears, right? The everyday, which might be moderately intense, and then there's the back against the wall one. And both of them require courage, right? So I like that. My book is more organized around tips and tools and actionable things that people can do to actually develop the capacity to take action, thereby having courage.
I want to dive into those. And that makes me think of one of my favorite quotes by John Wayne, which is courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway.
Oh, I haven't heard that one. I like that. That's a good.
I watched a few of the John Wayne movies. I'm not going to tell you I'm the biggest fan in the world, but he was a man's man and just, courageous from everything I saw. But
that's cool.
Let's talk about one or two of your biggest tips to access the courage that's probably already inside you. I don't think you have to go find it anywhere. It's like, it's already there, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect segue, actually. So the first one is conviction. And that's a deep sense of purpose. That's your why. In other words, you have to locate and embrace why you're willing yourself, why you're interested in doing something that every sort of psychological bone in your body, every element of fear is saying, no, don't do this, right? Now, I find in my work that conviction comes generally from one or two sources, sometimes both. There's a professional source of conviction, which might be, I'm terrified of speaking in public, but it's really important for my career. I want to be a small business owner. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be a leader, whatever it might be. Or, I'm afraid of being assertive. I'm afraid of delivering bad news. I'm terrified of going up and speaking and making small talk with people I don't know. But there is some source of professional conviction that I can use to will myself to do it, to take the leap. That's the first source of conviction. The second is personal. For me, I would say that oftentimes my source of conviction when I have to do something outside my comfort zone that's scary for me, it's personal. And that actually comes for me from the fact that I'm a dad. I've got two kids, 11 and 13, and I'm constantly trying to, nudge them in a gentle but productive way outside their comfort zones. And then when I kind of look at myself in the mirror, I want to be the example. I want to set an example for them. not doing crazy things, but, if I'm afraid of something, but I think it's a sensible thing for my career, I will do it. And I'll think of my kids while I do it. And so that ends up being a powerful source of conviction for me. So you mentioned one or two things. That's the first, conviction. The second that I'll just quickly mention, and I have to say, this is probably the most sort of exciting / surprising aspect that I found in my research. I call it customization. And this is really cool. I think this is really cool. It's the idea that there's no one size fits all way of doing anything outside your comfort zone. So whether it's public speaking or making small talk with someone you don't know or giving a speech or asking for money or delivering bad news, whatever it might be, there are ways, oftentimes subtle ways, sometimes even less subtle ways, that you can sort of tweak the setting, tweak the context, whether it's body language or prop. Sometimes people bring a physical prop, or maybe you can play with time or the context or whatever it might be. I'll give you two quick examples. And these are examples that actually aren't even in my book. These are examples that people who have read my book have emailed me. One woman was afraid of making small talk. She was terrified of making small talk with people she didn't know. And it was really stunting her sort of professional growth, but also just her well-being. And she happened to be a photographer. She loved taking photos. And she had this brilliant idea of bringing a selfie stick to little, get-togethers, to parties, to social gatherings. And it sounds crazy, but it was this amazing prop or tool for her. It started to catalyze her experience in this positive way. People would ask what it was, which is a great conversation starter. She'd explain it. It gave her some way of structuring conversations. People would be psyched. They'd try it out. It would be fun. She'd loosen up. She'd smile. She'd start to feel more authentic, even exchange emails. So I thought that was an awesome example of a prop. Another example, I'll give you one last example of customization. A banker emailed me and he said, you know what? Early in my career, I had to do public speaking and I was terrified of doing public speaking. And what I ended up doing, he told me, is that he ended up, maybe only bankers can do this because it requires some money, but he ended up flying a friend. This is from Boston to New York. So I don't know, about an hour flight, flying a friend in whenever he had really important speeches to give, and it had placed that person 8th row center to smile and nod and give him the positive feedback he needed to be able to carry through the speech. And so literally he was like a prop in the audience. So, there are all sorts of ways you can do it, but customizing I found is very powerful for learning to step outside your comfort zone. Gives you a little bit of an edge, makes it feel a little bit more you.
I love that. It's surprising. I never would have thought of flying someone up to have a familiar face in the audience. Although I wouldn't need it. Andy, I'm sure you probably wouldn't need it, speaking as much as you have.
Well, it's interesting. So I speak for a living, not in the way that some people speak for a living. I do a lot of keynotes and so on, but I'm a professor, and I realized several years ago that I basically speak, every week, multiple times a week in front of an audience. So yes, it's true. But I have to tell you, early on in my career, 15, 20 years ago, I was really uncomfortable speaking in public to the point of, questioning whether I'd be able to do it. And so I used these strategies as well early. I sort of didn't name them as these strategies because I hadn't written the book, hadn't thought of it this way. But when I reflected on my experience, I did the exact same thing. No, I didn't fly a friend though. I didn't have that kind of money in those days.
You had to figure out some other way to get that done, didn't you?
Exactly. Yeah.
When I think about this, I want to ask you about some of the work and research you did, because, I believe people should be going deep. And you talk about, being an academic, being able to do the research, and you've got a PhD. So everyone kind of probably sees you as someone that's gone deep on this topic. I'm right? I'm not marching down the wrong path.
No. That's right. That's absolutely right.
So when you're working with, Fortune 500 or, Fortune 1000 kind of executives or leaders or whoever that was part of that research, what are they bringing you in to talk about as it relates to their employees getting out of that comfort zone?
All sorts of things. When I did the original research, it was about, it depended on the context. So when I was interviewing managers and executives at a Fortune 500 company, actually Fortune 100 company, it was mostly about delivering bad news and laying off people, but also giving negative performance reviews. Those were some of the issues that were on their minds. I spent time with police officers in a major metropolitan city. I actually did a ride along one day where I went in the back of the police car with a bulletproof vest and everything. And I performed 20 evictions where we had to evict. I didn't do it. I was there, though, right there. Evict families from their homes. And so with the police officers, evictions was something that was really outside many of their comfort zones, as was repossessing property. I studied doctors performing painful procedures on young children. These are pediatric physicians. And actually, during that time, my own daughter had to have a spinal tap. She's fine, by the way, now. But so it was a weird experience for me that I had been interviewing these doctors, young doctors, about their experience performing painful procedures on kids and dealing with the repercussions of the parents. And then I was essentially a victim of that very same thing. Again, my daughter's fine. So it depended on the situation. And now when I go in and I do corporate training and I do corporate speaking, it really depends. A lot of companies bring me in to talk with new hires and high potentials. And the challenges are different, right? For new hires, it might be speaking up in a meeting or being assertive, speaking your mind, speaking your voice when people much senior to you might be around the table. For high potentials, it might have to do with, becoming a manager and a lot of the challenges that entails. A lot of people in companies, even though people don't talk about it that much, are very uncomfortable with self-promotion and sort of tooting their own horns when they know that that's important. And then with senior executives, it changes. I had one senior executive tell me that his greatest struggle is not being a micromanager. And it's really outside his comfort zone to let go. So you know what I mean? It depends on the profession and absolutely depends on a person's experience level as well.
Well, I appreciate you sharing all this with me. It's been fascinating for me. Hopefully the audience thinks so as well. I truly believe that, all growth is going to come through some level of discomfort, probably not to the extreme levels, but things that challenge you and make you want to grow. I think one of the actual, kind of metaphors I give is we don't go to the gym to be comfortable. We go there to push ourselves, sometimes really hard, sometimes not so hard. But thank you for being here on this. I want to ask you, Andy, about the practical and actionable. We talked about conviction. We talked about customization. You could take either of those and go deeper, or you could add something third to the list of what could our audience do that's practical and actionable to move forward outside their comfort zone?
Sure. I think I'll add something. So I think that so I have customization and conviction, and a third element I talk in my book is called clarity. And the idea here is that a lot of people, when they're stressed, when they're really afraid of something, they fixate on the worst case scenarios. Like we've talked about public speaking, the idea that like if I go up and speak in public, I am going to make a fool out of myself, or I'm going to faint or something like that, or whatever it might be, it's going to be the worst case scenario. And we completely focus on that. And that drives us to be afraid not to go outside our comfort zones. Here's the practical and actionable. This is something I do, and this is something I have my students and my clients do. Take out 3 pieces of paper, or take a piece of paper and divide it in thirds. Or if you're a computer person, create a file. Write down worst case scenario, best case scenario, and realistic case scenario. In other words, whatever it is you're thinking about, whether it's public speaking, whether it's delivering bad news, whether it's pitching your ideas to a venture capitalist, whatever it is, literally write down what my absolute worst fear is, my worst case. And then put a likelihood on that, 0 to 100%. How likely is that going to occur? Do the same thing with your absolute best case. Like the best case, I mean like your dream scenario, and then put a likelihood on that. And then write down what you think is the most realistic scenario. And then put a likelihood on that. And what I find is that when you can actually start to literally write down these things, a lot of things happen. First of all, you stop fixating on the worst case scenario. You also understand that the worst case scenario is actually relatively unlikely. And then you also start to have a bit more of a grounded perspective. You don't fixate on the worst and you don't fixate on the best. You sort of live in the more grounded, realistic present. And I think that's really critical for people learning to do anything new and stepping outside their comfort zones.
Well, fantastic. I love the fact that you go so deep into this and being able to come up with some very useful advice. And I encourage you all to strive to get outside your comfort zone. So, Andy, thank you so much for being here at Leaders in the Trenches.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
If our audience wanted to keep in touch with you, maybe buy that next book, what's the best place to send them to?
Great. Yeah, no, I'd love to connect with people. My website is probably the best place. It's the hub, which is www.andymolinsky.com. And the way you spell that is ANDYMOLINSKY, andymolinsky.com. I'm really active on LinkedIn and Twitter. I have a author Facebook page. My email is right on my website. Feel free to contact me. And yeah, I love hearing from people.
Well, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. That wraps up episode number 287. Another fantastic episode here for you. And I can't wait to share with you some of the new amazing guests I have coming up. It is going to blow your mind. All right. You have probably been on my list listening to this for ages, and you may or may not have bought my book. But if I offered you a special deal on my book next week, would you take me up on it? Like really super special? Like mega special? So look for a really special deal next week on my book, and you have to come back to the podcast to listen to it. So sorry, that's the way it works. Well, if you are looking to get outside your comfort zone, the book, The Trap of Success, will help you do that. And that special deal is just 1 week away. All right. I'll see you next time. And as always, live with courage. I hope you're loving Leaders in the Trenches and the guests we have on the show. It is all for you to create new strategies for your business. You can't do the same things over and over and expect new results. Your success depends on it. Tell us what your key takeaways are for this episode. Put them in the comments at leadersinthetrenches.com. Find this episode and join in. Love the show? Give us a rating on iTunes. It will take you about 2 minutes. This is easy. Go to leadersinthetrenches.com/iTunes. Thanks for listening in.